Hello, my name is Jacqueline Feldscher. I'm the Senior National Security Correspondent at Defense One. Thank you so much for joining us for this important conversation at the SEPA Forum on how technology can improve shared security. I'm joined today by our expert panel. We have retired Lieutenant General Ben Hodges, the Pershing Chair at SEPA and former Commanding General of U.S. Army Europe, and Joe Robinson, the CEO of Defense and Security at Improbable, a London-based company focused on multiplayer games. Thanks so much to our panel for being here, and without further ado, let's get started. So Joe, I'd like to start with you. I'd love to get your thoughts on sort of what trends and innovations you're seeing in defense technology right now, and how you expect them to impact how troops both train for and fight in conflict.
Wow, thank you ever so much, Jacqueline, for the introduction and the opportunity to talk. Hey, look, I think that's a massive question. So let me pick up, say, a couple of trends, and then yeah, I'd be really interested to hear what General Hodges' perspective on this, as well as a former warfighter. So I think it's undeniable that data is data is underpinning the modern world and the way that we make decisions across enterprises, and I think defense and national security is no different. I think the data is both a problem and an opportunity, both being able to get hold of and harness data in both the unclassified space and the open internet, and both the classified space, and bring those data sets together to create a holistic picture of the world. That's a massive challenge, I think, at the moment within defense and national security, but a great opportunity to be able to leverage. I think the other element as well then is the type of analysis that needs to be run and implemented against that data to pull out patterns and to understand, what's happening in the modern world. So just get a better understanding and a better picture of the state of the modern operating environment. So I think data and everything that surrounds data, and I'll throw artificial intelligence and machine learning into that bucket as well, which is really just about finding patterns in that data, I think is one of those trends that isn't going away, and it's just going to become more and more pervasive. So I think secondly, you've got to look at processing and storage, which really that means in the modern commercial world, cloud computing. So cloud computing, again, it's really still, I would say, in its infancy in the defense and national security community right now. I think that although cloud's been around since the sort of mid-2000s, and indeed there were some fantastic early adopters, especially in the US intelligence community, that have really pushed forward cloud adoption for the rest of NATO, and to show what can be achieved with leveraging hyperscale cloud for mission sets. I think we're still in the early days of understanding both how cloud can be most effectively utilized, not just as a storage device for data, but also the processing power that can underpin new technologies and new capabilities that require a lot of that processing power to scale and provide a level of analytics and understanding. So I think that cloud computing is a trend that will only see grow in its worth as an industry and in its impact across the industrial landscape. But I think it's something that within defense and national security, there needs to be a consideration and a balance between those who are concerned around the security implications of cloud, who owns cloud, and considering cloud as a critical national asset, which is often, a lot of the language at the moment is thinking of cloud computing as really a new type of critical national infrastructure for a specific company, but also how that can be best utilized and bring it forward to mission sets. And you see things now like edge computing, cloud at the edge, so-called sort of cloud in a box, that are being brought out by Microsoft and Amazon Web Services and a number of other cloud providers. As a former airborne troop myself, I know the idea of chucking something out the back of an aircraft, cloud, under canopy, sounds a little bit exotic for technology, but this is what you can literally do now with cloud compute devices. Ruggedized containers, put them into the field, and get capability right to the edge, genuinely, of an operating environment. So I think it's cloud, I think it's data, and then I think it's software, right? It's analytics, it's the ability to leverage that data, to leverage that compute power, and be able to see the ascendancy of software, which sounds like a crazy thing because software's been around for decades now. But as more and more military programs come online, the primacy importance of that software to enable integration with other units as we become part of a increasingly a multi-domain and interconnected world that need to integrate and to interconnect. and to make best use of software to do that. So new capabilities coming online, and also to bring the analytical power of those capabilities both into the decision maker, into the headquarters, and at the senior level, and be able to pass that information all the way through to the front line to enable seamless communication. So I think I'll stop there. Data, cloud, and software, three massive themes. I'm sure we could unpack in more detail, but that's my opener.
Gotcha. That's very interesting to kind of hear how the threat landscape is changing, and sort of how warfighters will have new tools to deal with it. Ben, I'd love to bring you in here, kind of from your position as a former general. How are you seeing the threat landscape change within NATO because of the advent of some of this new technology? Are you seeing these emerging and disruptive technologies change how the alliance is preparing for conflict, and is the alliance adapting fast enough?
Well, first, let me say how happy I am that Joe was on our side. I mean, what you just heard from him is really compelling, and having people like him and his team working to support the alliance and our nation's security processes and capabilities is important, because this is also part of the competition. This is how the Chinese Communist Party and the Kremlin and even other threats are looking to undermine our advantages in other more traditional capabilities. So this is where we have to compete. Now, two or three things he said that I really like. First of all, the ability to deploy these things into the field. If we end up in a conflict, we're not going to be deploying into a local training area or into a nice downtown hotel where you just plug your systems in. It's going to be in a very competitive environment where the Russians in particular have extensive electronic warfare capabilities to jam, to intercept, to find us and target us. So having a protected, deployable capability is something that has great appeal to me. The second part of this, though, is interoperability. When I hear about technology, I always worry a little bit that maybe what we have and what we come to depend on won't work for everybody. Imagine the American-led Enhanced Forward Presence Battle Group in Orzic, Poland. It has a Croatian company, a British company, and a Romanian air defense battery under American command, and then the American command is under a Polish brigade. They have to be able to have secure communications and to operate digital fires in a heavily contested electronic warfare environment. So these kind of capabilities that's part of the requirement that our industry partners have to aim. The last point I want to make is, and I'm an infantry soldier. I'm just now learning about things such as quantum computing and all these other concepts that Joe was talking about. But for sure, capabilities to completely rupture or get inside all of our secure networks, that's here. And so we have got to make sure that we don't just assume we can operate on all of our systems, that they're all protected. There still is a human requirement for discipline and training as well.
Well, great. Joe, I'd like to get your thoughts on sort of what challenges smaller, more innovative companies face in working with the NATO members to solve some of these problems that the general has laid out, and sort of what you would like to see change about how companies are able to work with these governments.
Yeah, thank you, Jacqueline. So I think, look, the fantastic thing about working in this market, and I don't even want to say market, but in this community of actors, both from working directly with users on the front line, warfighters on the front line, through decision makers, through to academics that support those organizations, and indeed the entire industrial base, is the fact that it is the most rewarding sector of all to work in, because you're contributing to the most important mission there is, which is keeping everybody safe. So I'll caveat everything I'm about to say with recognizing the reason why we stick at this as a small business is because of the mission. the mission that that I was very proud to serve on when I was in the military, and the mission now that my company is supporting through working at Improbable to assist the defense and national security community of the Western world. But yeah, you're right. There are challenges as a small business, and I think the one that I would focus on most specifically is this idea of bridging the valley of death. I think in defense and national security, there is a vast amount of innovation happening. I think we've sort of cracked and we should be applauded for doing this as a community. We've cracked the kind of innovation gateway problem, which enables small and medium-sized businesses to get in, to demonstrate some value, to get some R&D dollars to get things going, and to demonstrate pilots, pre-production work, demonstration work at the front door. And then there are loads of front doors now to access, from DIU in the United States through to Defense and Security Accelerator in the UK, various different NATO software incubation hubs and innovation hubs. So lots of R&D money. But actually, when you look at the number of those pilots, those prototyping opportunities that get pulled through into core programs, so programs that are funded over multiple years, which are integrated, as General Ben said, the importance of integration inside existing systems. So all of the legacy equipment that we're utilizing today, that service personnel are utilizing today, and bringing that in to enhance and support those capabilities. It is a tiny number, sadly, a really tiny number of those projects that get brought in. And you would think that the reason for that is because most of them fail. And I think that we are more comfortable now with the idea of failing fast. You hear this a lot in the language of our senior decision makers. We're going to do innovation, we're going to do it quickly, we're going to fail fast, we're going to learn. And I think that's great. But actually, part of the reason, or rather part of the problem, is the fact that those pilots and prototypes that go incredibly well are almost become the victim of their own success, especially with software, because the line between a pilot program and a production piece of working software is very, very thin. It's not like buying a piece of hardware where your pre-production stuff is there to inform your long-term future procurement, but it's very thin. So very quickly you go from pilot to capability. And the problem then is that the system to assess the requirements, to run the competition, to select the vendor, to negotiate with the vendor, to bring them into core, that process is so lengthy, it's so bureaucratic, and it's so difficult to navigate as an SME without the advice, the support, and the understanding of the industry is incredibly difficult. And so often businesses are faced, and I see that with many of our partners. We work with a vast ecosystem of partners, from really small enterprises up to big defense, and it's heartbreaking to see small businesses that have fantastic capabilities that have done incredibly well in pilot programs essentially being disregarded because it takes years to bring those into core programs. So this is I genuinely think this is the problem of our time. If the defense and national security community genuinely wants to leverage innovation and bring it into core, they have to solve this problem of taking successful demonstrators, successful pilots, and saying, I want that, I'm going to bring that in now, and I'm going to get that into the hands of our users. And it's even more concerning when you have users that have been engaged in those pilots. So, warfighters that have been engaged in those pilots who have been given the software and suddenly have it taken off them following that piece of work. So they're like, hey, I was using this and it's great. It's better than what I have today. I want to keep using it. And now the system is telling me I can't, because we have to go out for a long competitive tender. We have to do more analysis, and it takes many years to bring that in. And a final point I'd end on, not wanting to be the sort of doomsayer, and General Ben will know much more about this than I do, but I can't imagine that our adversaries have the same problem. Given the connection between the industrial, take China as an example, given the connection between the government, the industrial base, the academic community, those lines are very blurred. When the government wants to go after something, it reaches into its state, it grabs it, and it pulls it through into core. And we don't have that ability to rapidly grab things and bring them through into core programs. To me, that is the challenge of the time.
Ben, would love to get your response to this from, you having worked within the military, sort of if you think this valley of death is bridgeable, why it's important for the military to do so, if you believe so. Just would love to get your response to this.
Well, if I may, I did a poor job of answering your whole question earlier. I'd like to circle back to NATO, which is part of this bridge building effort to which Joe has referenced. And for the Biden administration, of course, emphasizing the importance of alliances, both with NATO as well as out in the Indo-Pacific region. I do believe that the alliance is addressing this. The alliance recognizes the importance of exactly what Joe has been describing. Obviously, an alliance with 30 nations, sovereign nations, and multiple partners is not going to necessarily move rapidly on this, but there's no doubt in my mind that the alliance sees it. And then also, and this is where I think it's very important, we have to get policies right in order to take advantage of the technologies that are emerging. Artificial intelligence, which is already playing such a critical role in so many aspects of what the military does. Not every nation has the same view when it comes to policy. Right here in Germany, where I live, there is significant debate about how do we employ how would the Bundeswehr employ artificial intelligence, for example, or hanging weapons off of drones, autonomous targeting, this sort of thing. So there's a policy component that is just as important as the actual technological component. Now, I do like what Joe talked about with research and development, and this is where I think the alliance could also be smart to incentivize more research and development by giving nations credit towards their 2% for R&D into things that have military application. Again, here in Germany, that's a bit of a problem. Most universities are reluctant to do research and development on behalf of the Bundeswehr. So finding ways to incentivize research and development for these capabilities that have military application, and I think the 2% model is a part of this. The interest, maybe where I slightly disagree or would go in a different direction from Joe on the problem of the adversaries. No doubt they don't have to deal with a lot of the various steps inherent in a liberal democratic society. However, they also they can't unleash the talent of young people the way that we can. And I think young women and men, entrepreneurs like Joe Robinson, that are able to really do the research and develop capabilities, that's our advantage. And I hope we don't squander that advantage by burdening them with too many obstacles, but instead finding ways so that actually more companies do make it into providing capability.
So I asked Joe about sort of some of the challenges the industry faces in doing business with the governments and with NATO. Ben, I'd like to get your thoughts on sort of where you see the biggest gaps in NATO's ability to actually bring this new technology in, train people how to use it, field it. What do you think are some of the biggest challenges there for the alliance?
First, it's getting the requirement right. If you took 100 people out of any NATO headquarters, or frankly any American headquarters, and said define interoperability, you would get 100 different definitions. And that's why we still are not able to talk on secure radio, FM radio, between an American system and a British system without some kind of, extra steps. So getting the requirement right in all of these things and having some kind of forcing function for it. NATO has an office that is the repository of interoperability standards, but they have no forcing or enforcing capability. So for me, that's got to be number one. And then number two, you have to exercise. Joe talked about fail fast. We have got to add a higher degree of robustness to our exercise programs and exercise to failure. And that means exercising all of our systems, exercising in a heavily contested EW environment where our networks are being hacked or disrupted all the time. We got to get away from the DV Day being the big event and instead get to exercises that test the full ranges where space-based platforms are interrupted, where we don't have GPS, for example. These are the kind of areas where the alliance, I think, has to, in each of our nations, this is an area where we need some work.
Well, I think we are unfortunately nearing the end of our time. I know this is something we could talk about for a lot longer, and I'm sure these are themes that will be picked up throughout the rest of the conference. But thank you so much to both of our panelists for joining us here today and sharing your thoughts. Thank you so much to the audience for tuning in, and have a great rest of your day.